What's up, everybody? It's your boy CS Motivated Minds. So I'm gonna just go on and jump straight into this. Juneteenth is upon us. Earlier during the week, when I was out doing what I do, somebody asked me, "What are you doing for Juneteenth?" And I said, "Nothing, because I don't celebrate Juneteenth." And they just kind of looked at me sideways. And they asked me why. Juneteenth is a BS holiday. So later on, somebody asked me, "Well, what do you think about Juneteenth?" And I said, "Nothing. It's a BS holiday." And once again, this person asked me why. So I had to explain to them. Juneteenth is a BS holiday because the way it was sold and pushed, when it became a federal holiday, was that it is the official end of slavery. That's a lie. Juneteenth wasn't the end of slavery. June 19th, 1865 is the day that General Granger made it to Galveston to let the people there know that they had been freed. It was not the official end of slavery. So, in my opinion, Juneteenth should not be a federal holiday. It should be a state holiday that is celebrated in Texas like it has been for many years. Yep, some of y'all gonna say,
"Man, you tripping."
Actually, no, I ain't tripping. Because once you understand the history and how all of this went down as far as freeing the slaves, then you will understand why I say that Juneteenth should be a state holiday celebrated in Texas and not a federal holiday. Let me go backwards and then I'll come forward and try to paint this picture so that everyone can understand. On 1 January 1863, while in the midst of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which really didn't free anybody. Now, I know some of y'all are going to say, "Well, what you mean? How do you figure that the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free anybody?" So let me ask y'all, has any of y'all ever read the Emancipation Proclamation and what it says? No? Okay. So basically, it says that all persons who are enslaved in states that are in rebellion against the Union shall be freed. All right, so let's think about this for a second. Okay. All persons held as slaves in states that are in rebellion against the Union. All right, well, let's think. So what were the states in rebellion? Well, there was South Carolina. They started it. Then there was Mississippi, of course, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, and Texas. They were later joined by Virginia, Arkansas, and Tennessee. I can't forget when the Emancipation Proclamation says that persons held in bondage in states who are in rebellion against the Union, those are the states that they mean. Now, this is what y'all have to remember, that those states seceded from the Union, which means that they were no longer part of the United States. They were their own country, the Confederate States of America. They had their own president, Jefferson Davis. They had their own vice president, Alexander Stephens, and they had their own constitution. So the reason why the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free anybody in those states is because they were their own separate country. Therefore, Abraham Lincoln, who was president of the United States, could not decree any laws in the country called the Confederate States of America. Does that make sense? That's almost like Canada coming down and trying to tell the people of the United States what to do, right? Can't do that. So that is why, well, one reason why the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free anybody. Two, you got to remember that there were states within the Union who had slaves as well. If those states who were slave-owning states within the Union had not abolished slavery, guess what? The Emancipation Proclamation didn't apply to them either. Why? Because they were not in rebellion against the Union. And again, you got to remember what the Emancipation Proclamation said. It was only for the people held as slaves in states in rebellion against the Union. Now, we also have what was known as the border states. Now, I know some of y'all are going to say, okay, so what were the border states? The border states were Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, and Delaware. Those were slaveholding states as well. But guess what? They were not in rebellion against the Union. So, guess what? The Emancipation Proclamation didn't apply to the slaves held in those states either. So I tell y'all again, the Emancipation Proclamation did not free anybody. Now remember, we're talking about Juneteenth and how they sold us that lie that it was the end of slavery. Okay, now think about this for a second. You all know how in a lot of my videos I talk about the 13th Amendment? Okay, now, what did the 13th Amendment say? That slavery, nor involuntary servitude shall exist in the United States unless it is a punishment for crime. The 13th Amendment was passed on 1 January 1865. Now let's do the math. 1 January 1863, 1 January 1865, that's 2 years. If the Emancipation Proclamation had freed the slaves, then why was there a need for the 13th Amendment? I'll wait. Okay, keep in mind, we're talking about June 19th, 1865, right? So from January to June, was it about 6 months and a couple of days, right? Now, Juneteenth is when General Granger made the Galveston, told the people there that they were free. But here's the thing, 13th Amendment didn't actually become a law until it was ratified on December 6th, 1865. Ratify basically means to sign or give formal consent. If you remember from a government class or a history class, it takes 3/4 of the states to ratify an amendment before it becomes a part of the Constitution. So back then, that meant that 27 of the then 36 states gave their formal consent for the 13th Amendment to become a part of the Constitution. So therefore, June 19th, 1865 cannot be the end of slavery. The reality is, Juneteenth is when the last slaves were freed in the Confederate States, or, as the Emancipation Proclamation put it, the states that were in rebellion against the Union. So again, they sold us a lie. Y'all gotta remember what was going on when they passed Juneteenth, right? That was when the whole George Floyd thing was going down, and some people was feeling kind of bad. Not really. So they felt like that they had to do something. So what they do? They gave us a federal holiday that nobody asked for instead of giving us the police reform that we was asking for. That's called pacifying the people. Now, here's the kicker to all of this. Slavery, technically speaking, didn't end then. Why? Because Delaware did not ratify the 13th Amendment until February 1901. So let me explain this real quick. When the 13th Amendment was first proposed, Delaware refused to adopt and ratify it because that particular state claimed it was contrary to the principles in which the government was framed. Now keep that in mind, but that's a whole nother video. So keep in mind that it takes 3/4 of the states to ratify an amendment before it becomes a part of the Constitution. So again, I said back then that meant that 27 of the then 36 states gave their formal consent for the 13th Amendment to become a part of the Constitution. They all agreed, so they ratified the 13th Amendment. What happened was they declared the 13th Amendment ratified without Delaware's concurrence. That's not saying that anybody was still in bondage, but it was still on the books in Delaware as being legal, although it officially ended for the United States government. But that's when we start getting into states' rights and this, and that. And if y'all really want to see more, then do the research. So either way you look at it, June 19th, 1865 was not the end of slavery. We can go with December 6th, 1865. But the whole point is we got to stop. And I'm happy that they finally recognize what happened, but we got to stop buying into the lies and the myths that are sold to us. So this is just me, and this is just my personal opinion. For people to be walking around with Juneteenth shirts celebrating June 19th, 1865 as the official end of slavery is ridiculous, because it's not. And all we got to do is pick up some books or use the Google machine and ask. You can even ask Alexa. Watch this. Alexa, when did slavery officially end in the United States?
From historyonthnet.com. Slavery officially ended in the United States on December 6, 1865, after the 13th Amendment to the Constitution was passed and ratified, abolishing slavery across the nation.
Anyway, this your boy C has some motivated minds. I just want y'all to think about it.